y'all doing marvelous as always. Welcome back to another session. This is session number 118. It's part one of a 4-part series where I'm going to talk about military training, right? Now, I actually had shot this video, but if you follow my Instagram, part of the technical difficulties I had was when I shot this one the first time, my microphone picked up a lot of static. So when I went back to go listen to it, my voice, it just got lost in translation. You know what I'm saying? Like the static just took over everything. So, here I am reshooting it. But a lot of y'all know I was in the Army. So, I want to kind of talk about training a little bit. It's interesting. You know what I'm saying? A lot of the things that even me as someone who served, and even to this day, I've been out since 2016, right? That's when I got out. And, even to this day, there's still some things that I wish that the military would teach people. Would teach our soldiers and sailors and Marines and airmen and even Guardians, which is, part of the Space Force. But to go into it, so part one, I'm basically going to just go over everything, like it's pretty much the basics, right? It's just sort of an overview as to how the military in general does things. I'm going to start off with the fitness manuals. So every branch has somewhat of they have either a fitness manual or they have some sort of standard or procedure or policy, guideline, whatever you want to call it, some sort of framework for fitness. Now the Army's, their field manual is 7-22. It's holistic health and fitness, and it covers a soldier's physical, mental, sleep, nutrition, and spiritual health. Navy, they have their own version. It's the OBNAV INST, the 6110.1. Now, when you go to look this standard up, 6110.1 is just where it starts. There's subsections that lead to, that cover the entire, fitness part of that manual. So when you get to 6110.1, you'll maybe see 6110, of course, alpha, 0.1 alpha, bravo, so on and so forth. You'll see alphanumeric characters. And then you got the Marines. Theirs is the MCRP 720C.1, right? And then Air Force and Space Force, because the Air Force, Space Force is essentially a part of the Air Force, it's like it's sort of a subsidiary, if you will, of the Air Force. In the same way that, Marine Corps is a part of the Navy in a sense. It's part of the Department of the Navy. They're still separate branches, but, they kind of do go hand in hand a little bit, right, in that sense. So you'll notice here with the Air Force and Space Force, with the exception of the alpha headings, right, they utilize a similar manual. And when I get to part two, which is going to talk about the PT test between all branches, the Air Force and Space Force's PT test, they are also very similar. There's only one thing that differs, but I'll cover that in part two. The DAF Man 36-2905, that's Air Force's manual, and then the Space Force's SPF MAN 36-2905. So, those are all fitness manuals for all the branches. I sure enough did forget about this one right here. Now, this is Coast Guard's manual, and I decided to go ahead and use the one that has the most recent changes for this year in 2026. This is the ALCOAST 007/26 here. So it's the Coast Guard's physical readiness program. Now I'm going to go into prep drills for fitness. Now, since I served Army, most of what I'm going to talk about is going to be tailored to Army because that's the one I have firsthand knowledge and experience in. So all these other branches, I'm sure they have their own prep drills, but Army is the one I know the most, so that's probably the one you're going to hear me talk about a lot. Anyway, I'll say for Army specifically, the Army has what's called preparation drills, which is what you do every morning when you do physical fitness. Before you actually conduct your PT, whether it's a muscle failure day or a run day, you'll do what's called the preparation drills. It's basically intended as a warm-up, opens your muscles up, right, to, get ready to go on that run or to conduct muscle failure day. Whatever it is that your unit has planned for you for that morning. Preparation drills, there's an acronym, that we would all use. There's different acronyms you can use to memorize the preparation drills. Some of the ones off the top of my head is be right here real soon, we found privates behind Popeyes, or be ready, high ready, so we fight punch by punch. So what that basically is, it's an acronym that goes over all the preparation drills. Bend and reach, that's what the B is, okay? The bend and reach is an exercise that looks like this, okay? And then you have the rear lunge, and then you end up going over to, the high jumper, okay? all of these movements, they affect your muscles in some way as far as getting them ready for whatever it is that you got going on for a PT session. So you work on explosive movements, you may work on like core strength, things like that. All of these preparation drills is intended to warm you up and help prepare your muscles for what's to come. After the high jumper, the rower, okay? And then, so that's the be ready, high ready. So we fight. So the S is gonna be the squat bender. The W is the windmill, and the F is the forward lunge. Now after that, you have punch by punch, okay? The P stands for prone row, all right? So after the prone row, you then have the bent leg body twist, okay? So then after that, the last exercise in the preparation drills ends up being the push-up, okay? They're usually done between 5 to 10 reps, right? At least in the Army it is. Like I said, other branches, they may have their own set of, preparation drills or whatever that they do before an actual session for PT. 5 to 10 reps is good enough for everyone to open their muscles up and get them ready for whatever's about to come. You don't want to do too much too fast. It's the same concept as people who do cardio before a weightlifting session. That you can do that if your body's conditioned for it, then hey, by all means go for it. But most people and most research says that it's better to do weightlifting first and then do your cardio session afterwards. But even then there's nuance, because it depends on what type of session you're doing in weightlifting. It depends on what muscle groups you're working. So for example, I would probably not recommend you do cardio after a leg day or after a back day. These are really big muscle groups, and they're also big muscle groups that you tend to use whenever you do most forms of cardio, whether that's going for a run on the treadmill or you're doing the rower, the bike. Maybe you don't use your back on the bike, but you definitely use your legs to pedal. You know what I'm saying? Stuff like that. The elliptical, same thing. So I wouldn't recommend doing cardio after a leg day or a back day or any big muscle group like that. If you're doing an arm day, perhaps, you can probably do cardio after an arm day, because arms are a small group. Those consist of mostly isolation movements and not so much compound. So just as an example, right, of why you don't want to do too much before you get to your actual session. You don't want to do too much in the warm-up. You want to do just enough to open your muscles up. Last but not least, preparation drills, for each branch or, just in general, they would be considered dynamic stretching, which is what you do before a session. Static stretching, if you remember from my session 117, where I talk about injury prevention, stretching before and after. Dynamic stretching is what you do before a session. Static stretching is what you do afterwards. Now, in the interest of static stretching, I wanted to go ahead and add those here since I didn't cover it in the initial video when I shot it. But there is what's called recovery drills for Army specifically. You have this one, which is the overhead arm pull, right? And it's pretty self-explanatory. And of course, with each exercise, you're going to switch both sides after a certain amount of time. Then you have rear lunge that comes next. Then you have here the extend and flex, sag in the middle and then arch your back. And then you got your thigh stretch. And after that, you have the single leg over. And that right there covers the static stretching or recovery drills part of your Army PT drills. So after the PT session, this is what you'll do. You also, in the military, you will train how you fight. So, doing PT is one thing, right? You're doing PT in your actual PTs or whatever, your uniform, that's one thing. But you may do PT in your combat uniform as well, depending on the unit, of course. There's different types of jobs in the military. Of course, you got infantry, they train hard, right? Cav Scouts, same thing. I'm just speaking Army, of course. Marines, obviously Marines, they train, in my opinion, probably the toughest. Unless, of course, your special forces in any other branch, then, you'll be up there, of course. We got Army Rangers, Navy SEALs, Air Force has their own special forces. TAC-P, I know is one of them. I got hip to that when I actually, looked at joining the Air Force before I ended up going Army anyway. But, you'll train how you fight, PT in boots. So, if you do that a lot in the military, for those of you that are active duty or looking at going in, expect to, do PT in boots a few times. And even if you don't do PT in boots, you walk around in boots all the time. Like you're walking around all day in your combat uniform, which includes your boots. So what I would recommend is getting inserts. They may be necessary for you. I know when I was in, I put inserts in my boots. I always got the Dr. Scholl's, and I always try to get the gel inserts. So that way the gel, it absorbs the impact every time you hit the ground, whether you're running or you're just doing a simple walk, right? You're just walking from place to place or what have you, marching, things like that. It provides you some comfort. Especially helped me out when I deployed in 2015 and I went to the Middle East. It's a very rocky environment that we were in. I believe a big part of why I ended up with plantar fasciitis was because of walking on, rocky environments out there and things like that. There were times where if I hit a stone the wrong way, plantar fascia towards my heel would hurt so much for so long. It would take forever for it to actually lighten up. I would recommend inserts for you. How you tie your boots does make a difference as well. Now there's this boot, I forget what it's called. I think there's a term for how you tie it this way, but you can tie your boots the regular way and then you just tuck them in. But there's another method that I learned when I was in boot camp where you take the strings and you take each string and tie it around that top part of your boot. And then, you bring them around, lace them up, and then tie them and tuck them in, tuck whatever excess is hanging out in your boots. Tying boots that way, is a lot more comfortable. It made them comfortable to walk in and to even run in, when we had to. PT with gear. So you may do PT also with up to 30 pounds or more gear. And what that may consist of is ruck marching. I know that's a common one, right? You may ruck march for miles and miles. If you're doing PT with your regular unit, if you're say for example, I was a wheel vehicle mechanic when I was in, and we wouldn't ruck march for too long. We ruck marched a few miles, but if you're infantry, you can expect to do maybe double that. You can expect to, and especially if you go to school, like in the Army, we have air assault school, and then there's airborne school. I know I was part of a detail where we had to be there for an air assault school. We basically had to watch them go through an obstacle course and wait at the end with some water so that we can wash their body and face or whatever off from the dirt and sand that was down there when they would low crawl or what have you as part of the obstacle course. But we also, I remember the last day of our detail, that was the ruck march. And we had to just kind of drive around in the truck with the a water tank hooked up, just making sure that everybody had water and making sure no one passed out, and that we didn't have to pick them back up. So ruck marching, you're gonna ruck march for a long time, right? And when you do that, usually the gear weighs a lot. So if you're part of your gear is likely going to be maybe your vest, your IOTVs, what they call it in the Army, and plates, right? Or if you're with your unit, you may just do a rucksack or a salt pack or something like that, and they may just tell you to pack it full of gear, 35 pounds, and they may even weigh it just to make sure that you're not BSing. So what I'd recommend is, for a rucksack especially, you can do this with an assault pack too, but a rucksack has more padded straps than the assault pack does. What you can do is you take the straps that you used to tighten up the straps of a backpack, get the rucksack high and tight up on your back, and then just pull down on the bottom strings, on the thinner strings. And what that does is it lets the assault pack sit higher up on your back, so that way your lower back and whatnot doesn't have all the issues that would come with carrying gear so low. At least if it sits up higher, it's a little more comfortable for you to walk around in. That's one thing I did learn. Last but not least, in training how you fight, in that element you also have what's called combatives. Speaking for Army again, combatives, you have levels 1 through 4, right? Level 1 is basic combatives. Level 2 is tactical combatives, and then levels 3 and 4 are the instructor levels. So level 3 is the basic instructor, so you're teaching basic combatives. Number 4 is the tactical instructor, so you'd be teaching combatives level 2, the tactical combatives, basically. But level 1 is you'll basically be learning in the basic form of combatives, how to strike a little bit, you'll learn clinching, grappling, things like that. You basically learn close quarter combat. Now level 2, you do the same thing, except it's a little bit more advanced. It's a little more expanded upon. In that level 2, you may have to learn how to deal with the detainee, or they may teach you how to, do vehicle removal. Maybe you remove a suspect out of a vehicle, while you're pulling security or something like that. So you're gonna need to know how to do those things, right? Making sure that a suspect doesn't get the upper hand on you. Because again, when you're handling a detainee or you're pulling them out of a vehicle or whatever, those are still close quarter situations. You're up close and personal with the suspect. So So they'll teach you those types of things in combatives level 2. I can tell you one thing about Marines, which I'm gonna cover in the PT test, but to give you a preview, as it ties to combatives and training how you fight. A part of the Marine Corps' PT test is they have a combat fitness test, right? And in their combat fitness test, there's 3 events. One is, and this isn't in the right order, but one is the ammo can lifts overhead. So you'll take a 30-pound ammo can and you'll do as many overhead presses as possible in 2 minutes. The other 2 is movement under fire and movement to contact. So the movement to contact, you're basically moving how you would if you were coming in contact with enemy, fire, what have you. The movement under fire, it's already assumed that you're under fire, so you may do events such as, of course, sprinting, right? Dragging a buddy, you may have to drag or carry a buddy, if he or she got shot. You may have to drag them away from fire, drag them behind cover, things like that. You may do high and low crawls. All of that is part of the Marines' combat fitness test. But I'm gonna save the rest for part 2. You're gonna wanna tune into that one. But it goes into training how you fight, And that's gonna be it for this video. It's pretty short. I didn't want this to go very long because, part 2, just a little forewarning, a little disclaimer. That one's gonna be a long one. Kind of had to be because, I'm going over the PT test of each branch. So that one's gonna be a long one. This has been Military Training Part 1, Session 118. I will catch y'all on the next one. Have a great rest of your day or night, whatever time it is you're watching this. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe if you feel inclined. And I will see y'all later. Y'all take care.